Blasphemous 1 has a new art book. The Art of Blasphemous Complete Edition features the game's concept art in higher quality and now includes content for its 3 DLCs. Over 100 pages were added to this edition, bringing the book to a whopping 304 pages. And being the Blasphemous nerd that I am, I compared each and every page between the editions to see what new information and concept art was added. And as I would find out in a few cases, what content was removed between editions. So let's get into the new information and art featured in the Art of Blasphemous Complete Edition. First up, we have added concept art and information about the NPC Nacimiento added in the Stir of Dawn DLC. His visuals were inspired by the grotesque style of David Cronenberg's horror films such as The Fly and Videodrome. And the visuals of the Ancient One growing in and then birthed out of Nacimiento were inspired by Quado from Paul Verhoeven's sci-fi thriller Total Recall and Takashi Miike's comedy horror film Gozu. These films all feature visceral and gross practical effects and makeup that comes through with Nacimiento, whose visuals are delightfully disgusting. Thematically, Nacimiento takes inspiration from Oscar Wilde's gothic horror novel The Picture of Dorian Gray, a story about a man who keeps himself young and handsome by transferring his aging and debauchery to a portrait of himself. And I previously discussed this thematic inspiration during a 2020 interview with creative director Enrique Cabeza. For more discussion about this particular topic, you can check out the interview in this video on the channel or in my Blasphemous 1 deep dive video, both linked below. Next we have the NPC Jibrael, also added in the Stir of Dawn DLC. The inspirations for Jibrael cited in the art book all draw from the Christian Holy Week processions held in Spain. In the DLC, Jibrael plays the saeta that awakens Monacitas using a miracle twisted version of the cornet, a brass instrument that is used frequently during Holy Week processions. In addition, the lanterns that sprout from his flesh were inspired by the lanterns that accompany Holy Week processions. It's implied in the DLC that before being twisted by the miracle, Jibrael played the saeta using a cornet to announce the processions of the Twisted One held by Laudes and the Monacitas throughout Custodia. The miracle became jealous of Laudes' devotion to the Twisted One, which was so strong that the Monacitas were formed from her passion. Jibrael seems to have gotten caught in the crossfire, twisted into a herald for the Monacitas that embodies the sounds and sights of those processions. Departing the Stir of Dawn DLC, the next bit of information included in the art book is about the wounds of Eventide boss Sierpes. Sierpes is an old Spanish word meaning large serpent or snake, and this boss was inspired by the legend of Calle Sierpes, or Serpent Street, a famous commercial street in Seville. Back in the 15th century, children were mysteriously disappearing around Espadero Street in Seville and no one could figure out why. This continued for months and the citizens of Seville became desperate. One day, the mayor of Seville, Alfonso Cardenas, received a letter from a prisoner who would provide the culprit behind the attacks, but only if the mayor agreed to release him from prison. Argueso Melchor de Quintana was a student who was imprisoned for partaking in a rebellion against the king. It sounds like a pretty severe crime, but desperate to end the disappearances, Mayor Cardenas agreed. Quintana then recounted how he dug a tunnel to escape prison that opened into the sewers below Seville. As he was making his escape through the sewers, he encountered and slayed the culprit. Not wanting to remain a fugitive for the rest of his life, he returned to prison to strike a deal with Cardenas. With Quintana's direction, soldiers went into the sewers to recover the body of the culprit. At the location provided, the soldiers found the bones of children and the recently deceased corpse of a large snake. The snake's corpse was pulled out of the sewers and displayed for the citizens of Seville on Espadero Street, which would from then on be named Calle Sierpes. Mayor Cardenas upheld his deal with Quintana, who would go on to settle in Seville and marry the mayor's daughter. Now, if you've watched my Blasphemous deep dive, you've already heard this inspiration explained, but I think it's a fun legend and couldn't help but share it again. Moving on from characters and bosses, the art book explains the inspiration behind everyone's favorite area, Mourning Havoc. The Virgin of Carmen, in invocation of the Christian Virgin Mary, is the patron saint of the sea. Annual maritime processions are held in coastal Spain cities on her feast day on July 16th. It is these maritime processions and patronage to the Virgin of Carmen that inspired Mourning Havoc. You can see this inspiration in the design of the boat that ferries the Penitent One across Mourning Havoc and throughout the shipwrecks of the area. I do talk about additional inspirations related to Mourning Havoc in my Blasphemous deep dive, linked below for those that are interested. And lastly, for new information, we get a little about the creation of the Alcazar of Grief, the 8-bit Easter egg added to Blasphemous in the Strife and Ruin DLC. For the Alcazar of Grief minigame, the Game Kitchen explains that they conducted an analysis of classic 8-bit video games to get an authentic look and feel. They developed a limited color palette and dialed in the dithering effect used to make it truly look like an 8-bit game. And I don't know about you, but I personally think that after all of that analysis, the Game Kitchen should make sure they get a good return on investment by making a sequel minigame in Blasphemous 2. While that's the extent of the new development information added in the Art of Blasphemous Complete Edition, there were a couple of pieces removed. Blasphemous 2 characters like Cesario, Lesmes, Infanta, and Susona were originally cut concepts from Blasphemous 1 and have been removed from the Complete Edition now that they have a home in the Blasphemous 2 Artbook. In addition, concept art of the Tres Angustias was also removed from the Artbook. While not outright stated, the reason for this is likely because of the incident with Finnish artist Juha Arvid Helminen. His piece, The Queen of the Invisible Empire, was inadvertently copied in likeness for the design of the Tres Angustias. The Game Kitchen fully owned up to it, making a post about it that's linked below, and now licensed the design from Helminen. However, that puts the concept art for the Tres Angustias in a weird spot, and I wasn't terribly surprised to see that their concept art was removed from the Complete Edition. But for those bits that were removed, new concept art was added tenfold not only for the DLCs, but also for a good chunk of the concept art for the base game that wasn't previously included. And while the concept art included is obviously gorgeous, the book itself is a piece of art. I got the collector's edition and the cover is tactile and feels great, and the print quality of the concept art looks great. Game Press and the Game Kitchen really put effort into the design and layout of the book, with a myriad of graphic design and English translation improvements that make for an overall better presentation of the concept and information. The slipcase included to house both art books is sturdy and looks great on the shelf. And for the record, I wasn't sponsored by Game Press or the Game Kitchen, I'm just a Blasphemous fan who's always loved video game art books and devs sharing their process, and this is just a really good example of it. If you'd like to check out a good chunk of the concept art featured in a digital format for free, I'd recommend checking out Juan Miguel Lopez Berea's site, linked below, that features a gallery of Blasphemous 1 and 2 concept art that he created. He also has some Blasphemous merch on the site that I'm definitely picking up at some point. And there you have it, all of the new information I could squeeze out of the Art of Blasphemous Complete Edition. The art and art direction of Blasphemous has always been top tier, and the Complete Edition is a celebration of that as well as a peek into the creative decisions that generated the art. If you want to learn more about the inspirations behind the Art of Blasphemous, you probably know very well by now that my channel has got you more than covered, and you can find those videos linked below. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, and let me know in the comments your favorite character design and why. I'm going to go with Melquiades, who's not only a fun fight, but also a great design inspired by a mix of some wild real-world history and Spanish culture. And finally, as always, thanks for your support, thanks for the burly arms that lift Melquiades aloft, and thanks for watching.